just because isolation is trending, and isolation in the workplace, and isolation at home, isolation in your communities, doesn't mean you have to be a victim of all this isolation. With me today is a very dear friend and colleague, Lora Picini. Yes? Did I do it right? Yay! I am notoriously horrible at doing names. So let me first introduce you to our audience. Lora, I may not know how to say her last name, but I can tell you she has a resume that you will want to pay attention to. She has been an attorney for big companies. She has been at the forefront of D&I for corporations. She is a community leader in things like human sex trafficking. So today, if anyone knows how to combat being isolated and what are the tools, particularly if you're a corporation, it is my friend Lora. Lora, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. I'm excited to be able to talk to you today.
Yeah. And so, the topic of a conversation today is leaning in, because you, like, exactly how many thousands of women participate in lean in circles in the United States, or the world?
I don't know. I want to say 50,000 plus. Yeah, ladies.
Yeah.
All over the world.
So lean in circles, that's the topic. How to fight isolation with lean in circles. Sure. First, tell our audience, if they're not in corporations, what is a lean in circle?
Sure. Well, Lean In is an organization that Sheryl Sandberg founded with another person, after writing her book, Lean In 2013.
And tell everyone who Sheryl is, because not everyone.
Sure. Sheryl is the COO of Facebook, or Meta.
She was.
And in 2011, she did a TED Talk on why there are so few women in leadership. Right. That TED Talk spawned or sparked a great interest in the topic about women leaning into their own careers and getting the courage to lean into their careers. So from that TED Talk, she wrote a book called Lean In in 2013, and it came out to great reviews, mostly positive, some negative, but that's the world.
Yeah,
right?
I was one of the wait a minute, if you're her, yeah.
And that was the general consensus on the more challenged side, I guess I would say. And so from that, she started an organization called Lean In. It's a nonprofit, and it works on sharing data, information, tools, tips, and tricks for advancing women, because, we'd love to say that we've made a lot of progress, but there's still so much progress to be made. So she really dug into this. She really leaned into this particular topic, and she didn't have to. She had a great career.
Because it was before Me Too. It was before remote work. It was before all the social, everything that did the second level. I mean, this was, so that's why I appreciate how long it has sustained and how it's been morphing. Yes. You have a particular experience that I think encapsulates, and shuts down the grumpy people like me who thought oh yeah, if you're her, it's easy to lean in, and I would love for you to share the story of that spark plug moment when it all made sense, and the contribution it made to you.
Sure. When I read the book, I had this overwhelming feeling like, oh my gosh, other people are going through some of what I'm going through. Feeling like an imposter or a fake sometimes, feeling like I'm not necessarily welcome in the room at meetings, as I was working in corporate America at the time. When I read that and I saw that others were obviously going through it, or they wouldn't have been able to write a book, because nobody interviewed me for the book.
And you know me long enough that's one of my favorite lines, because of everything that I work in positive psychology and mindsets and things of that nature. When people start reflecting rather negatively on how they are, that old line that I use is, hey, listen, They write books about this. You're not the only one.
Right, right. And there was Stanford University backed research and other research. I mean, for every concept from a gender perspective that she had, there were footnotes back to in-depth research that was done. And for someone like me, who's very fact-driven, having been a lawyer for so long, the book blew me away. But one of the biggest concepts was what, in fact, the name of the book, which is Lean In. And the idea is that you take some initiative to lean into your own career. So in my role as a what was called a property attorney, so I worked for a big casino company, and I supported several casinos on the Las Vegas Strip. And in that role, I would go to the management meetings so I could hear what was going on from a business perspective, security, IT, and everything. I could be there to give advice, but also just to listen in and learn about the business. So when I would go to those meetings, it had been suggested to me that because I was coming from corporate and I wasn't a property employee, that I should sit along the wall in the conference room. I should sit in one of the chairs that was along the left or right wall, because I was support. I wasn't part of it.
And let me tell you something. When I first heard you tell this story, for me, that made perfect sense. Like, it almost felt like a moment of courtesy that, when, you're with a conglomerate and you go in and there's property level people and, it's like the local people or the corporate people, whatever. Yeah, you would make them the center of attention. So I'm going to tell you, from my perspective, it seemed like a natural direction.
Right. Yeah. No, and I get that. And I think in the beginning it was that way. But what I realized over time is that at these meetings, people were actually turning and leaning over their shoulder. They called me Picini, by the way.
Right.
They lean over their shoulder and say, Picini, what do you think? Or Picini, can we do that? Are there issues with that? Picini, Lora. And it occurred to me that in a way, they looked at me as their property counsel, like I was.
Yeah.
So after reading the book, Lean In, I realized, I think I belong at that table, because that's part of what she talks about is when you go to a meeting and you sit in the back of the room, or you stand against the wall in the back, and you don't sit yourself up front, or you don't put yourself in the mix, then you're not in the mix and you're not being seen as part of the team. So I thought, well, let me get up the courage to do this. And this was a meeting where the leader of the group was a bit old school, and I had a very strong personality. So if they were not happy with me taking that chance, they would let me know either directly or maybe more subtly. So I was definitely a bit anxious, but I got to the meeting early one day, and I actually sat in a chair, and I knew who was sitting in that chair normally, but I made sure there were enough chairs on that side of the table so I wasn't gonna knock someone out, and there were extra chairs. Sure. And you know what? They came in and they kind of looked at me for a second, and they just kind of nodded their head like, oh yeah. And they sat down. The meeting went on. When they had questions, I was right there. They didn't have to get a crick in their neck, turning over their shoulder to look at me. And the world didn't come to an end. And considering most meetings, there were 2 women in the meeting, maybe 3, if we were lucky. It was kind of nice for the other woman at the table, or the other 2 women, to have someone else there as well. So,
yeah, and
a regular thing.
There was so many things about that story that struck me. One, my own reflection. Like, I wouldn't have thought, and I know that if I was the leader, I probably would have made that same kind of suggestion. Hey, to make them feel like it's their meeting, kind of thing. And the point I learned from your story was, we should always question when we're trying to orchestrate. That's pretty old school in itself. The position, we grew up with the studies of the position at the table and who's got the head of the table and who's got this, are we tired yet? Please, if you've got something to contribute.
Right.
And, then the second part of it was that the receptivity, that how people look to us and how it gives leeway, and how our actions aren't just about us. Like, when we're leaning in, we're not doing it just for ourselves.
Yeah.
And, I took so much from that story from a standpoint, because I kind of know that I'm a bit of, I I like the old school. I still like lots of things. The old school benefited me. And yet at each turn, particularly for the younger generations, to be able to know how to be fully in their knowledge when they show up, and not, they don't have to be antagonistic. You were not antagonistic. You just surveyed, you looked at your experiences and you surveyed, wait a minute, let me see. They don't like it, I'm going to know about it. And then it gave you, so that was the first little thing that happened. Can you build on that? Can you tell me whether, like once you did that one thing,
right,
did other things follow suit?
Yeah, I mean, the gap between what I thought they thought of me and what they really thought of me was like the Grand Canyon. I mean, I really didn't realize that they felt like it was perfectly natural for me to be sitting there. So that was a huge, like the whole rest of the day, I just remember just trying to fill in that gap in between. And that's the other piece that Sheryl Sandberg talks about with the imposter syndrome, where you just feel like they're going to figure out you don't know what you're doing. So, I mean, that was a big part of it, but it really gave me the courage so that when I would come back to these meetings, heaven forbid I had got there with 30 seconds to spare, because this leader, if you didn't show up on time, the door was locked and you were in trouble. So I remember showing up at meetings and there wasn't a chair left.
Right.
And that the first time that happened, that was another gulp kind of a moment, where I went to the side of the room and I grabbed a chair and I rolled it up, and the two gentlemen sitting there separated their chairs and let me fit in between them. So, I mean, that was a really, a big deal for me to realize at a higher level that I was welcome there,
And one of the things I want to bring out to our listeners, which I think is so important, the word imposter syndrome. You are a person who was an attorney for how many years when you were doing this? It is amazing what we put in our heads. And the sooner we can learn that things like the imposter syndrome are created by us in our heads, the same way isolation is something, I feel isolated is either you getting depressed about being isolated or you saying, I'm feeling isolated, I better see what there is to be able to counterbalance that feeling.
Yeah.
Just because we feel like, who made it a bad thing to feel like an imposter?
Yeah, I think, and I think I've shared with you, Andrea, I like to say imposter moments now. I don't like to use the word syndrome. I'm only using it because for those who have read the book or who are going to read the book, that's what it's referred to. But I had seen something on LinkedIn and I'd love to attribute it to the right person, but I don't have it here. Somebody talked about imposter moments because we have areas in our life where we feel like a fraud and someone's going to catch us. And then we have other areas where we feel like a bad, what, where someone says to me, I'll take care of it. And you're like, oh no, I've got this. And in that area, you've got it. In another area, you don't. And everybody has that. And so in that way, I think it also welcomes men. It welcomes all genders, actually welcomes all genders, because saying it's a syndrome sounds like you need medicine. There's a pill, you need to go to the doctor. You may never get over it, that it's a chronic disease. And I just think that looking at them as moments that when we're not sure, it's part of it. And I also think that there's, the encouragement that you get from mentors and having a strong network that make you feel like you belong. I think women don't get that naturally as much as men. And even being as much of an extrovert and a people person as I am, I think as a lawyer, I didn't necessarily have mentors who helped me with the networking. They helped me with my legal skills. Not with my belonging and growing as a person in my legal field, if that makes any sense. So
no, it makes perfect sense. And what was I'm so grateful that you brought up the topic of, truly, this is a gender equality issue when it comes to everyone feels like an imposter. Yeah. I have been communicating back and forth with a young man in his 30s, fabulously successful young man over the last 7 years. In fact, what he's done between 26 and 32, most people don't do between 26 and 72.
Wow.
And yet he's now going into a different field. And he used the term, I feel like an imposter.
Yeah, we all do.
It was, and then he talked about blocks. And this is the interesting thing, because I think this is kind of where we started out. Like, just because something's trending doesn't mean we have to keep going along with the trend. We can stop. Right. So when it comes to like blocks, like imposter syndrome is a block. Not feeling included, trying to see if you're part, that's a block. At the moment that we recognize, wait a minute, not serving me, you could spend a whole lot of your time finding out, why did I let them tell me not to sit at the table? Why? Or you could take an action as you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting with this young man, what I said was, the only purpose of recognizing a block is so that the next action you take can help reduce whatever that resistance is, so that you can move forward.
Right. And for me, once that happened, and once I started sort of literally, it literally feels like leaning in, like I would go to meetings, and I was really conscious about, if we had a leadership summit or something, I would get there early and try and sit in one of the first few rows. I would try and go sit towards the front. First of all, so it would make me stay awake. But second of all, I just wanted to be a part of the action, and it empowered me. But the more important thing that I did, because I've had women come up to me afterwards and tell me thank you, is I share this story whenever I'm with a group of women, and I was going to say younger women, it doesn't matter. Women who are earlier, women, men, all genders who are earlier in their career, I stand in front of them, they see someone who's accomplished a certain amount, and maybe I've accomplished more than them. So they say, 5 years, maybe I'll be where she is. And I tell them how terrified I was. And I tell them that I got up the courage, and it empowers them, because I think they don't expect people to be vulnerable. And I think that's one of the most important things that you can do. I haven't really had men come up to me, but I do see, when you're the one talking, you see people that very subtle nod, and it applies to everybody. So I just
think does.
Telling your story.
I always say that the workplace and the power struggles are equal opportunity disruptors for sure. They just, they may get us in different ways, but boy, the structure does get us. Just for my own edification, I know right now you're in the process of creating your next opportunity, in your long and storied and successful career. The lean in circle, you're still part of the circle you were originally a part of. It comes with you. What happens?
Yeah. So the lean in circle that I was a part of was at my employer that was a big, large casino company. And there were 7 of us in the group. And over time, several of us left the company, and we have managed to stay in touch. And it's almost like you knew, Andrea, but about 3 days ago, I reached out to them and said, I miss you all. We haven't gotten together in a while. I think 2 people are still at the company, and the other 5 have moved on. And we are currently trying to get our group together, because these groups can be really powerful, because basically you try to find people that are sort of at your peer level or close to your peer level, and you all agree to share on a confidential basis what you're going through. And it's amazing how just having someone there to support you can make all the difference. And you started talking about feeling isolated. Knowing that you have these other people in your circle that you can talk to absolutely helps with that. And again, I haven't read Lean In a long time. So that feeling of, oh my God, I'm not the only person who's going through this. That feeling isn't, top of mind. And so when you share something and someone says, oh, I had that with a boss like 2 years ago, let me tell you how I handled it. it may not be the way you want to handle it,
Right.
but it shows you that there are options
Right.
for getting through a problem. It's not a boulder that's in your way that you will never be able to get past. So I strongly recommend them. I think the work that they do at Lean In is still very important and very relevant for women of, all ages.
I would actually love to see the work of Lean In blended with the more current book, The Future of Work. And because I think what each one of those books has to offer is a way to keep progressing the system in a way that really does work better for all of us.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Lora, thank you so, so much. I know that this will be of great value, and maybe it will encourage someone to find a Lean In circle, create a Lean In circle. Do take an action if they are feeling isolated in any part of their life.
That makes me happy to hear that, because I love inspiring, and I love others inspiring me. So if we create some new Lean In circles because of this, that's a wonderful thing. So thank you, Andrea.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lora Picini. Wish you well in whatever it is you're creating, and we're all going to come back and find out what that is. I'm Dr. Andrea Goeglein. Thank you so much for listening. Do find support. Know that none of us has to do anything alone. Thank you.
Thanks.